Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and I want to talk about 3 activities for adventurers and how we can think about these more carefully in Dungeons & Dragons and do a better job of delivering great content for player characters who are doing these 3 distinct activities. All right, so I've been thinking deeply about the adventure, right? I don't think we really understand. It is my humble opinion that Dungeons & Dragons is a crisis, an emergency, as a crisis that turns into an emergency that turns into a puzzle, and that we are recognizing the crisis in our lives, turning to Dungeons & Dragons as people to solve problems that only Dungeons & Dragons can solve. It turns into a mystery of what is Dungeons & Dragons. There's this ontological mystery of what is a Dungeons & Dragons. And then once we recognize the ontological question of what is Dungeons & Dragons, it becomes a puzzle in our life. How do we use Dungeons & Dragons maximally on the 95 years that we are granted on this planet, right? And how do we use Dungeons & Dragons to bless ourselves and give benefit to ourselves? And how do we use Dungeons & Dragons to bless others and give benefits to others? How do we use it as a tool, right? Not as a toy. Like that right here on this channel, you will hear Dungeons & Dragons discussed as a tool. On other D&D commentary channels, you will hear Dungeons & Dragons discussed as a toy, right? And you have to decide, right? Do you want to begin to engage with Dungeons & Dragons as a tool, or do you want to keep it as a toy, right? So you're Geppetto, right? Are you going to go on the adventure with Pinocchio, or are you going to sit him on a shelf and think that he's a toy, right? Right? That's the question, all right? So, so today I want to talk about 3 activities for adventurers, right? We as people, we make this choice in life. We live as regular muggles, or we live as adventurers. I choose risk. I have a considerable amount of risk in my life, which I choose, right? Because I want my life to be an adventure, and I want to be an adventurer. But the player characters that we play, they are adventurers, and I think there's 3 activities that we need to start thinking about them. Doing, questing, traveling, and steading, all right? Questing, traveling, and steading. Let's talk about these 3 groups. Questing. I don't need to talk much about this. You know about it. You know what questing is, right? You like your dungeon master gives you quests. Done. You know what a quest is. You know how to complete a quest. You've done it, okay? But what happens when the quest is finished, right? Here you have traveling. Adventurers travel, right? They complete a quest and they keep moving. This is a part of being an adventurer, right? An adventurer is ready to combat any foe that stands in front of them. They're ready to interact and build robust relationships with the people in their group, in their adventure party, right? And with the people in the woods, in the plains, in the forests, in the mountains, in the islands, and in the swamps that they encounter, right? They're building these interactions, these robust relationships, right? And they are traveling. Right? And so what happens, so this is the point, right? We need to get better at thinking about this time and how this time is used in Dungeons & Dragons. When they are traveling, when they're traveling a mile on the plains, when they're traveling a mile in the forest, when they're traveling a mile on the mountains, when they're traveling a mile through the islands, over the rivers, right? When they're traveling a mile through the bog, through the swamp, through a decayed area, right? A forest that has fallen into entropy, right? That's a swamp, right? Really, you can think about it as a swamp, right? Because Dungeons & Dragons magic comes from the 5 sources of land, right? Which is in, this is, so of the 5 sources of plains, forest, mountain, island, swamp, right? So what happens when they're traveling? So we need to be very careful about, there's just no quest right now. But the player characters are traveling through the world, and they are encountering people, and they are doing things. What needs to happen in a travel period? Why are they traveling? Many explorers will go to just hit that 3rd column, exploration. They want to see the world, and they want to put themselves in places where they can help, right? And they travel when they are in an area of peace, where every other muggle in the world stops and stays, right? They travel. They go to the next place. They're like, things are good here. There is peace here. My sword is not needed. My fireball is not needed. The healing power of my deity is not needed, right? You know, the excellent swift sleight of hand that I have to free evil ones from their belongings is not needed here. I will travel to where woe is. I will travel to where suffering is. I will travel to see this world, to experience this world, right? And we will see if there's a place that is in need of what I do as an adventurer. Last is steading. Let's talk about steading. What is steading? Steading is important. Steading is when you stop questing, you stop traveling, and you start steading as a player character. This is important. When does this happen? This happens when you got that cheddar, when you got tens of thousands of gold pieces. You stop and you build your theater, right, to serve the people serve the people in that area. This is where you stop and you build a ranch. This is when you stop and you build a fortress. This is when you stop and you build a tower. It is steading. It is when an adventure stops and stays. But Dungeons & Dragons doesn't have to stop. You can keep going. And we really need to think about, so we already know about questing, right? We got that covered. We need to start thinking about how better to use traveling and steading as dungeon masters. Well, that's my humble opinion. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.